Welcome back to On Texas Football. Today's Wednesday, December 17th, and we're bringing you a little Wednesday afternoon update. I'm CJ Vogel. This is Gerry Hamilton. Talking portal, what Texas will be pursuing, obviously, in the running back department. And, of course, some big decisions, both returning to campus that we believe, also some NFL decisions that we're keeping an eye on as well. But first, Gerry, I know that there's been some murmurs, some rumors, some scuttlebutt, even a report out of Gainesville, Florida, that Texas has a $1.5 million offer on the table for Jaden Ball should he enter the NCAA transfer portal. First and foremost, what do you make of that? Is that something that Texas is likely to do? But all in all, I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, I'm not sure I buy that one based on what we've heard behind the scenes. And look, we'll see if Jaden Ball actually enters the portal, because a lot of the stuff right now is agents negotiating to get a price to which a kid would stay at said university he's at, right? So first of all, the players got to enter the portal. But we do not at On Texas Football believe $1.5 million is an offer out there to an agent, right? Because obviously the only university can talk to a player right now is the university they're at until they officially enter the portal. So we need to put that out there right now. Is their agent back? Talk, of course. That's what the businesses we're in. But we do not believe the 1.5 million is an accurate number. CJ, and let's lead into this. Texas definitely wants a running back in the portal.
Definitely.
And there could be few guys out there that if they enter, Texas would have very strong interest in. Without naming them, because these guys have to enter the portal first.
Yeah, I guess that's the big kind of moment that Texas is in right now, just waiting to see who officially declaration, obviously, to enter the portal, right? And that's kind of the frustration as you're sitting here and anticipating, well, it'd be great to have player X, Y, and Z, but if player X, Y, and Z do not enter, Gerry, they got to move on to AA, AB, AC. You get what I'm saying here. But I wanted to go back real quick because you mentioned, the job of an agent. And I think that's lost when we sit here and kind of ponder over who you could then just kind of poach. But the job of an agent obviously is to attract a bigger dollar sign. How frequent is this happening where agents kind of manipulate one team, one school to earn a bigger paycheck elsewhere?
I think it happens a lot. Because the reality is in where we're at in college athletics right now through the NIL is an agent can say, go to a school and say, hey, or a collective and say, hey, school X over here is offering this number. And there's no way to corroborate it. So you're basically at the point of saying, how bad do we want this player to either stay, or how high of a bid do we want to compete for this player? If we, even knowing, and I've talked to GMs on the basketball side and football side, even knowing they know that number is probably inflated as to what that other schools actually or collectives actually offered. So that's the thing. It's being used a lot because I think the big thing is, hey, plan A, is your plan A to stay at said school? If a kid says yes, okay, then this is what we have to do to get that number as high as possible. And there has to be somebody else that wants you to be able to manipulate that number higher.
In a way, I kind of picture, a lot of these front offices, whenever it comes to retaining players, they're playing Texas Hold'em without ever seeing the river, right?
Yes, 100%.
And they basically have to say, hey, am I calling bluff, or do I believe that, there is a good offer on the table for these guys? So that's kind of the day and age and the challenge that these front offices are facing right now for Brandon Harris, for Steve Sarkisian, their teams here. Look, you obviously want to be aggressive, but you also have to look at your own rosters and say, okay, who else could be targeted elsewhere? So Texas right now continuing to play defense in that regard as well. But Gerry, next up at running back, you mentioned that you basically just have to sit here and wait until someone declares that they're entering the portal. Is there anything else to that? Can you sit there and elaborate, or is that where we're at the moment?
Yeah, I think that's where we're at the moment. Look, I think behind the scenes, these colleges know there's 3, 4, 5 potential heavy hitters that may jump into the portal at the running back position. But again, how much is a negotiation for said player to stay at the school they're at versus actually going to end up jumping in the portal? That's, CJ, to your point, that's why you better have 4, 5, 6 options at each position. Because the likelihood, as we've learned from the past, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, remember, they're jumping in the portal, here they come. They never jumped in the portal.
Yeah.
These schools fight to the death to keep the players they truly want to keep. In the case of a DJ Lagway, when he went in the portal, everybody assumed Ball was going in the portal. Here's the thing. Florida said, you can stay if you want. That's not really telling a player and agent they want you.
That's a great point. Add TJ Woods to that list after last year's playoff run as well. But what we do know is that there are still some decisions on campus that could have major implications to this 2026 team. You posted a quick update on Hero Canoe, sticking towards a little bit more of what's already on campus. Canoe will be deciding between returning to Austin or entering his name into the NFL draft. Jerry, what's the latest on the defensive lineman?
Still in decision-making mode. And look, that doesn't mean something couldn't happen today or tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday. Look, it's in the balance. But what the person very close to that recruitment and player told me today via message was that they're in talks trying to come to a decision right now. And that includes in talks with Texas and also seeing where his projectable draft grade actually is. So I think that's essentially what this is coming down to. A lot of people, I think, thought since Hero Canoe walked on senior day that he was gone. Well, the reason he walked on senior day was because all of his family or key members of his family were in Austin from Germany. And so they wanted to see him walk. That didn't mean he was for sure leaving. Does he ultimately leave to the NFL? We'll see. But I can say as of earlier today, we're talking about Wednesday right now, about 4:15 when we tape this show, that earlier in the day, right before lunchtime or around lunchtime, I was informed that they are still in the decision-making process. And that means talking to Texas and seeing what that possible NFL grade is.
Obviously would be huge for Texas to get a big time veteran piece back with Canoe on the defensive line. There's also another decision here that Texas is awaiting, and it sounds like there was a meeting with Steve Sarkisian and Jack Gendry, Jerry. I know that we've talked about it for quite a while, but it seems like this one is trending in one direction. Which way is that one?
Yeah, it seems like this is trending towards going to the NFL draft as your most likely in-game answer. With Jack Gendry. And look, I mean, multiple people have put him in the top 5 tight ends in this draft. And if he's in the top 5 tight ends in this draft, if that's actually truly projectable, CJ, it's hard to say no at that point because there's no guarantee you're moving up from there next year in what some people consider a much deeper draft. So from what we've heard, he's had a great experience at Texas. But if his time is to go pro, it's his time to go pro. And right now, that's where the trend is.
Yeah, and I think that's an important piece. I want to focus on that just a little bit. The years in which players are eligible to declare, whether they're coming off the best years of their career or not, you have to look around and say, okay, at tight end this year, what is it? It's Kenyon Sadiq, it's Max Clare, Michael Trigg. They got some talent there, but it's not what we saw a year ago. Right. And at wide receiver this year, and, particularly speaking for DeAndre Moore, hey, it's probably much better to enter this year given what's entering in 2027. So that's also a big factor is the draft classes, obviously, at each position. What we do think as well, Jerry, for guys who will be returning to campus, or at least that's the indication that we've been given right now. Trevor Goosby, Jelani McDonald, has anything changed there in your eyes?
No, we continue to hear some positive things in terms of Trevor Goosby returning. I think the preference is to return, and I think the preference is to return for multiple reasons. Number one, I feel, I think there's a feeling of unfinished business there. Yes, his brother's coming in, but if he's a top 10 pick, that doesn't matter anymore, right? I mean, let's get real about the situation. Austin's going to be a future draft pick too. So now if they're there for the same year, that's great. So I think there's some feeling of unfinished business with Trevor, but I also think this is a huge piece of the puzzle here if he does return. Trevor Goosby and the people around him, when he goes pro, they want him to be developed to the point of knowing he can be a 10-year pro and have a legitimate pro career, not still being a guy that needs to develop in the league as much. And he does. He was a basketball player that got to the weight room later. That extra year in college could benefit him greatly from a strength perspective. Tony Hills this morning on Coffee and Football talked about some of the things from a technique perspective, gaining that power and leg drive in his lower body, which that's always going to be behind for those basketball guys 99% of the time that move to football. They haven't spent as much time in football strength and conditioning training growing up. So I think that's a key piece to him. So I think there's a lot of things leading to Trevor Goosby returning, even though he's a possible projected late first, early second round pick. I think the key here is Texas in Goosby in his circle and agent in that final meeting from an NIL perspective. I think if that gets sorted out and everybody's happy with that, I think the chances are pretty decent or good that Trevor Goosby comes back to Texas. CJ, I was going to lead you into Jelani McDonald because we haven't heard anything's changed there. That's still looking pretty positive for Texas as well.
Yeah, that back half of what you said about Gooseby is very much where things sit with McDonald. Hey, finalize that NIL number, make sure that both sides are happy. But right now, there's folks up in Waco that believe that Jelani McDonald and his camp is a top 50 pick in 2027. And that is, again, going back into what would then be a very top-heavy class with wide receivers. A lot of quarterbacks will be eligible. Still, there's a vision and belief that Jelani will play his way into that conversation based off of what we've seen this year, Jerry. He would have gotten drafted or would be getting drafted this year alone. But obviously, you look back at what Michael Taft was able to do this year, Jahdae Barron the year before, returning for that extra season, that plays a long way into a decision. So right now, still continuing to lean a positive way for a return for Jelani McDonald. I'll say this as well for Trey Wisner. I mentioned that on a couple shows previously this week. His first meeting with Jabbar Jalouk went very well. For that energy kind of reminded him a little bit of Tashard Choice, in which they obviously had a fantastic relationship. Jalouk more seasoned, obviously. He's been around the block a few more times, but good positive updates there as well, Jerry. Before we get out of here, and just a reminder, we do have the Wednesday night live stream. It'll be Rod Babers and myself this evening. Jerry, real quick, kind of wrap this up for us. Any quick final words here?
There's some positives. There's some unknowns. There's some going pro potential here. Here's my last thing I'm going to say. In the NIL world, it can flip on a dime. So we could have to come back in less than 24 hours and do a totally different report. That's what I'll say. But right now, well, the positives we talked about are true, and they're there. We'll see what happens with Hero Canoe. The expectation is that Jack Injuries will end up entering the NFL draft.
Well, good deal, Jerry. Thank you very much for the update. And sometimes you just got to point to the sign behind you and believe a little, right?
Believe. You got to believe.
That's of course. But that'll do it for today. Make sure to get over to ontexasfootball.com. Use the promo code OTFOG for an annual subscription, $39.95. Make sure to get the latest with Gerry Hamilton, Bobby Burton, and myself over there. Jeff Howe does a fantastic job as well. But that'll do it for a little Wednesday afternoon update. Y'all have a good one. Welcome.